In this video, we're going to be demonstrating SQL injection, and we're going to be building, writing a little bit of code just to demonstrate how we can actually delete this table via a query to this orders table here. So we'll get to understand how serious SQL injection is, and if you've never heard of SQL injection either, this should clarify exactly what SQL injection is. And then of course we'll go on at the end of the video to talk about how you can take some very basic steps just to protect your queries. So the theory behind this is, we've obviously just seen this table here. This is an orders table. It has a user ID, a product, and a created at date. So I've just created 5 records in here just to demonstrate. I've also got this users table. It doesn't have any data in, but it doesn't really matter too much. We're not going to be directly querying this table. We're just going to be deleting this as an attacker. So what I want to do is, within my code, I'm already connected. I've created a new, or instantiated a new PDO instance. I've connected with my username and my password to this website database. And now what I want to do is I want to be able to take in an order number within the query string here, and we can pick that up using the get superglobal. What we're then going to do is place that directly within a query, execute that query, and then we'll actually look at how we can delete that users table. What we'll then do is we'll recreate the users table, and then we'll look at how we can prevent this. So the first thing I want to do is just a quick if statement to check if this this order key exists in the get superglobal array. And what I'm then going to do is just store this in a variable just here. So I'm going to say order, and in here we'll say order. So we now have this order that we can then place within a query. So all I really want to do here is just select all the data in that table where the ID matches this, and then I'm going to put a limit of 1 on the end of this, and we'll see why we're going to do that in a moment. So I'll create a string just here, and I'll pull this down just for ease of visibility of this. So I'm going to say select everything from orders, just a very basic query, nothing special, and obviously could be better. So I'm going to say where ID equals. Now this could be just a number, so where ID equals 1, and then I'm going to do a limit of 1. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to place this order in there. Now as it stands, this is we're not actually running the query yet, but this is an unprotected query, completely unprotected. If we were to run this query, we're not escaping this here, we're not doing anything, we're not using prepared statements, which we'll look at in a moment. So if we run db query SQL, this is then going to run that query, and there we go, done. So let's just output this so we can see that we're getting this result. So I'm going to call this a query, and then down here I'm going to do a print r on query fetch object. So let's take a look at that in the browser, and there we go. So we've got this object out. You can see that we've got our user, our product, and if we change this order, we obviously get different information. So this is typically how you might do things if you were selecting an order. It could be selecting a user, it could be selecting a topic, anything you're doing. This relates to pretty much everything. Now because we're doing this query and we're not escaping anything, what we can actually do is inject SQL into this. So we need to take a look at what we actually want to do, and I'll demonstrate that within this actual query. So order at the moment is just a number. You expect a user to enter a number. So 1, 2, 3. You don't expect them to type in a string. We're obviously getting an error here because nothing's found. You don't expect, wow, the query's failed because we put a string here and we haven't added single quotes around this. But we're basically expecting this to be a number. You may not see anything wrong with this query. But what's actually happening here is we can alter the value of order to change the structure of this query. So let's say, for example, order, and I'm going to type this directly in here. We're going to get rid of this. Let's say order is the following string: 1, and then a semicolon. Now what this will do is this will end this particular query. So now what we're looking at is multi-queries. And multi-queries are basically the ability to query a database but separate queries via a semicolon. So the string is 1 semicolon, and then space, and then drop table users, and then another semicolon, and then 2 dashes. Now 2 dashes is a comment. If, for example, I was to copy this and go ahead and paste it into SQL Pro, you can actually see here that we get this grey sort of area here. Now what that's going to do is it's going to select everything from the orders table where the ID is 1. Regardless of whether that exists, it doesn't matter, this will still be run. Now what will also be run is this, which drops the table, basically deletes the table. And there's no warning, there's no confirmation, it will just delete the table. So let's actually try and run this and see what happens. But I'm not going to do this within here, I'm going to actually do this as an attacker. So let's cut that so we can paste it into the query string in a moment. And let's place the order back in there. So we're going to keep an eye on here because what we're effectively going to do is refresh after we've run that page and this users table should be deleted. So in here I'm just going to paste that in, so 1 semicolon space drop table users semicolon space dash dash, and there we go. Now that's selected what we needed, but when we refresh inside of SQL Pro you'll see that the users table has been deleted. This is a massive problem. You can see, you could technically issue a command to drop all tables. Now, just very quickly, I want to talk about permissions. If you're setting up a database user, this is a good time to start to think about what permissions you need. Do you need a database user, i.e. when you connect to your database here, you wouldn't obviously use the root account. If, for example, my account was Alex and I had, say, a password in here, would you want to give this particular user the ability to drop tables? Probably not, because this is the user that you're using within your application. It's very rare, in fact, probably not, probably never need to do this at all. You'd never need to drop a table from your application. So you can disable the permission to do that, and that would have saved you a lost table. Now, apart from that, we don't just want to talk about permissions because we need to talk about actually how we're going to protect against this kind of attack. That's really, really important. So what we're going to do here is we're going to look at, first of all, casting this order to an integer, and then we're going to quickly look at prepared statements with PDO. So in this case, we know that the order number is always going to be an integer. We know that it's 1, 2, 3. It's never a float, it's never an array, it's never any other data type. It's always going to be an integer. So what we can actually do is we can cast this to an integer by placing this in front of it. Now what this is going to do is it's going to mean that whatever we put in here, well actually let's take a look. So let's kill the page just here and let's echo out order. Now without this we know, if we just get rid of this line here, without this we know that when we do that we get this string here. We know that that's a problem. We've just seen that it actually goes ahead and deletes the users table, and in actual fact let's just create that users table again. So we know that this deletes it. But if we cast this to an integer, let's take a look at now when we echo out order, what we get. There we go, we just get 1. Now the reason we get 1 is because there is a valid integer here, so it'll effectively just remove the rest of this. And therefore you have prevented that SQL injection from taking place. So let's get rid of this now. And let's talk about how we can use prepared statements, because you may in fact have, say, an order as a string. It could be, it's very unlikely. It could be a username that you're inputting. It could be anything. So now we're going to look at prepared statements to protect if you can't cast to a particular data type. And just remember that casting to a string isn't going to help you if it is going to be a string. So casting isn't always the answer. So we are executing our query here, but we're not going to do that anymore. We're not just going to blindly execute our query. What we do want to do though, I'm going to bring back this, in fact no, I'm going to get rid of that for now. Just down here what we're going to do is we're going to use a statement, and this allows us to use the prepare method within PDO. So I'm going to say db prepare, and then I'm going to prepare that SQL. Now this has validated, but it hasn't actually executed this query yet. Now we're not going to just blindly insert this order into here. What we're going to do is we're going to use something called a placeholder, and this will just be effectively a variable name, if you like, of what you want to bind later on. So what we're going to do now is down here, we're going to say statement equals statement execute. So on this line here, we're not actually execute, we're not running the query at all. When we execute, we can pass in an array with the placeholder that we've given and the bound value. So in this case, I'm going to use the order key because I've called this order, and then I'm going to place the value in here, which is order. So now what's going to happen is we'll do the same thing as we did before. Remember, we've recreated the users table. I'm going to run the same query like so. If we head over to SQL Pro and refresh, you can see that that table has not been removed. But you could go on and within PDO, you could grab the data from this as normal. So for example, we could say print R statement fetch object, like so. If we just get rid of that like that. There. So we've now done exactly the same thing as we did before, but this time we've protected against this kind of attack. So my advice would probably be always use prepared statements where you can. Now the MySQLi functionality within PHP doesn't allow for multi-statements by default, whereas PDO does. So you may find that when you're using MySQLi and use query, the query method, you won't actually be able to execute multi-line queries, so you will actually get a multi-queries, so you will actually get an error back. But that doesn't excuse the fact that you should be preparing everything. So it's probably a good idea to always do this to help prevent SQL injection. So we've looked at a couple of examples here, and we've looked at how we can protect against this. We've learnt the basics of SQL injection, and we've looked at dropping a table through a query string, whereas before it may have not been protected. So that's SQL injection in a nutshell.